Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Our next guest, of course, is one of my most powerful guests that ever call in. It's Darwin Porter, and he calls in from Staten Island. He's been doing this for, I don't know, maybe 25 years, a long time. And Darwin always has something so hot to talk about, and we have a great article that he wrote coming up in our May issue. It's called Binge Watching of Pandemic Movies. So, good morning, Darwin. Thanks for being there. Are you feeling well, I hope, you and Danforth?
Yes, indeed, and it is so good to hear a sane, reasonable woman giving wonderful advice to senior citizens in these apocalyptic times. And I congratulate you
Darwin.
for that, of course.
My question to you first is, have you ever lived in anything like this?
How do I what?
Have you ever lived in anything like this?
No, I haven't. Everything I knew came from my mother, who lived through the so-called Spanish flu at the end of World War II. And she told me all about it, and it was very interesting. She said that at first we thought it came and went, and then we all ran out and played in the sun and hung out with each other, and then a second sweep came in, and she lost her older sister who got the flu. And
really?
Yeah, and in many ways, we can get into that. In many ways, that is almost predicted for this time around. But first, I want to give you some breaking news. I want to lead in on something that no one has been talking about on the 24-hour news cycle. But breaking news, 2 hours ago in London, two former New York, the Sons of New York, two of them, were named the two most publicized men of the 21st century. And I think you know one of them.
Yes, unfortunately, I think I do.
Who is the President of the United States, and he now has abandoned New York as his address and moved to Mar-a-Lago. Well, he's not moved there, but that's his official address now. And the New York papers were very partisan, and they said, good riddance. But anyway, the second New Yorker, I think, will surprise you, and the second most publicized man is Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Now you say, what do you mean? He's not a New Yorker. Well, yes, he was. In fact, he was a New Yorker until 2016. He was born here, and as late as 2014, when he inherited property in the UK, he had to pay New York state inheritance tax. And this really surprises a lot of people because he seems so British, but he's one of our sons. And a lot of people don't know, but he's unique in many ways. He's a Muslim, he's a Jew, and he's a Christian.
Oh, come on.
Yes, he has all three, and of course, he really doesn't practice any religion. In fact, he's the only prime minister that England has had in modern times that is like not a member of the Church of England, and he even has links to King George II and King James I. But it's interesting. You rarely find a man who is a Muslim, Jew, and Christian. That's very unusual.
So how does that come about? Oh, this is a great conversation. I'll tell you, talk about news. My gosh, I never heard this.
Yeah, but I can now report on the family news. I don't know if you've heard it yet, but he had the virus, and he seems to have recovered, and he's back at work, although the Queen of England is not sure that she wants him parading into Buckingham Palace for the weekly meeting that, according to the Constitution, he has to have. She began receiving prime ministers with one called Sir Winston Churchill. Ooh, that sort of dates her, doesn't it? But
that's fantastic.
On April 29th, he became the father of a son. And his mistress, Carrie Simmons, gave birth, and she had a touch of the virus too. But the baby is a son. The baby seems very healthy, and his mistress is the de facto First Lady of the United Kingdom, and they hooked up with each other in 2019. And it is Boris's fifth, maybe sixth, maybe seventh child. Only he knows for sure. He would have other children, but he had them aborted. And
oh my heavens!
So he's doing. Apparently, he's doing very well. He's receiving people, and as I said, the United Kingdom is delighted that his new son is doing so well. But I find, he has. You've seen him on TV. He has the weirdest, unruly hairdo
yes.
that I've ever seen, and but a really very interesting figure. Now, news has broken also that another prime minister has come down with the virus, and he is the prime minister of Russia, and of course that's Mikhail Mishustin, and he said that he has not had any recent meetings with President Putin to spread the virus to the president, but he has met with several members in close proximity of the Russian cabinet. So there is now a fear that he infected the members of the Russian cabinet. So, before he was infected, the prime minister said that the virus did not originate in China, but was created in a laboratory in the United States.
No kidding.
He has no evidence of that. But the Russians also claim that the U.S. Created the AIDS virus. Again, there is no proof that ever happened, but that's called propaganda, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Oh, I love this conversation this morning. I don't know where you get this, but I love it. You are amazing. I'm sitting here on the edge of my stool right now at my home, and I don't want to fall off, but you've said so many things to me. It's Boriss Johnson that you have just absolutely overwhelmed me with.
Well, it's like I write. By the way, I just finished my Judy book, Judy Garland book.
Did you really?
At 4:30. Actually, to be specific, I don't want to lie to you. It wasn't 4:30. It was 4:31.
Oh, that's incredible. So now you put the final touch on, and it's going to go to your publisher, right?
Yes. We're rushing. But I wanted now, I also want to talk about things we don't hear so much about, and I get to something. But first, I had to comment on what happened yesterday with in Michigan. Now, the state of Michigan is the third most affected by the virus, and its governor is Gretchen Whitmer, and she is also the co-chairman of the election campaign of Joe Biden. And unfortunately, our president, I wish he hadn't, her name is Whitmer, but he calls her half-wit. Actually, she's a very intelligent woman. And
he calls her really half-wit? I didn't even know that.
Yes. I wish he hadn't done that. She's actually a very intelligent woman, and she's trying to keep the people of Michigan alive. And then they had the demonstration yesterday to shut down Lansing, which is the capital, of Michigan. And it's the the reason, and the people appeared mostly without mask, and there were swastikas. I know the Confederate flag, but I think Americans with do they know? They should read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and this swastika thing is not... it just shocked me to see it displayed on TV in America, you know. We fought a world war to get rid of that, so I'm very almost emotional when I saw it. It would just shock me to my bones, but...
horrible.
I'll get
horrible.
rid of the quiver in my voice, but this
horrible.
This is something. Boogaloo. They were members mostly of the Boogaloo Party. I don't know if that's been publicized much in South Florida. Are you familiar with the Boogaloo? Maybe not, huh?
Not really. I did see what you're talking about. I did see that on television, and I was so upset also
I'll tell you,
and horrified.
The Boogaloo
and of
Party
course,
is the...
Trump said they're good people.
Yes, he did. I'm not so sure about that. They're a rising party, and they're right now, they have an estimated 100 million social media posts. They're not known, but their main goal is to create a second civil war. I would think the one that ended in 1865 was enough, and they are the new version of the KKK, but the KKK was aimed mostly at African Americans, but these people are anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, anti-African American, anti-gay, anti-Latino, and anti-Asian. So they really are trying to cover a wide front here. And during the impeachment of Donald Trump, they gained at least 300,000 new converts. And they're all through the South. But I find I have no evidence of any branches in South Florida. But there is a branch of them in Florida, which is in the Panhandle, and they are associated with branches in Georgia. And, of course, there are members all through Alabama, Mississippi. And they're basically, they seem to be in their posts planning sedition and violence against minorities. They're threatening to wipe out the family of Joe Biden and his immediate family. Now, it's not unusual for presidential candidates to be threatened. You know, Franklin Roosevelt in 1933 was almost assassinated, so America almost didn't get Franklin Roosevelt as a president. So it's a very dangerous time. These people then moved against Gretchen Whitmer, and there were the familiar signs of lock her up, and they are protesting the shutdown of the government. They think it's against democracy to order people to stay at home. And this movement is raged not in just Michigan, but throughout the land, and probably in Florida has really played a key issue. Pictures, by the way, of Florida. I keep up with things going on in the world because on the three news medias in America, we seem to be concentrating a lot on face masks. Every time I turn on the TV, it's about face masks. But the news is going around the world now of other things going on. And
let me stop you. Let me stop you a minute to tell everybody. Sometimes I forget to repeat who you are because you are so incredible, and I'm so intent on listening. But we are very fortunate to be hearing Darwin Porter, who's a celebrity author, lives in Staten Island. He's written 25 or more books, and he of course writes a fantastic article every month in Boomer Times, and we always have him on the radio. So, okay, go ahead and continue. You were going to say something about Florida. I know that we're still, Dade County, Palm Beach County, and Broward, we're still at stay-at-home orders.
Yes, well, the main thing, it was not, in America, they're showing beach life in Florida. But the one thing that went around the world didn't concern the beaches. Believe it or not, it concerned Central Florida, which was the plowing up of like fields of green beans and succulent corn.
Oh.
And because these farmers in Florida have lost their restaurant markets and things like that. But the way it was interpreted by the world, which, by the way, is starving to death, I don't mean the entire world, but millions are starving to death. And so the way it was played around in TVs around the world is that Florida, or rather the United States, has so much food, a surplus of so much food, that they're actually plowing up their rich harvests, which come in, at this time of the spring harvest in Central Florida. And that's not, all of these farmers wanted to sell their produce, but the market had dried up, and it's sort of shocking, to see the world starving, and then this wonderful food being, it looked wonderful. It made me hungry. And
well, a lot of the food, Darwin, is they were giving it away, though. They were really trying to give it away.
Well, I know that, and I saw the lines really forming, and I know that people need it. But, of course, that's not what was shown around the world.
Of course not, right.
It was like this country has so much food, they're having to plow it under. It was... to starving people, that was a very shocking thing, and you and I know the difference. In fact, I just mentioned the de facto First Lady of Britain, and on our last show we talked about the de facto First Lady, Sandra Lee, who is now separated from Governor Andrew Cuomo. Every time I say his name, I want to say Mario Cuomo. That name is so embedded in my brain. That's his father. But she is really advocating, taking a harvest and freezing it. And I'm curious as to why a lot of that wonderful fields of Florida couldn't be frozen.
You're right. That would have been perfect. Absolutely.
I remember someone arrived, a friend of mine from Philadelphia, and she stopped in the farmland. She owned a home outside Philadelphia in the country, and she brought me 4 bushels of the best tomatoes I've ever seen in my life. And, of course, a tomato will go bad. So you know what I did? I just froze tomato sauce. I made 7 kinds of ketchup. Do you know there are at least 7 recipes for ketchup?
No, I didn't.
I just couldn't, I grew up in Appalachia where people were starving to death, and I've always been careful about, I think food is so precious because I've traveled all over the world, and the one thing that struck me is the starvation around the world is just horrendous. So I have very sensitive feelings about preservation of all food.
And I know I've been in your kitchen, and I know you have a lot of freezers.
Yes, I do. I need more. The one thing, I know time is limited, but I do want to bring up one really horrible thing, and that is the virus based on what happened at the end of World War I is likely we might get through the summer. And I think the Western world and Europe will probably solve and work this out. But what happened in 1918, and it invaded Africa. Now, as you know, there are 54 countries in Africa, and I used to live in North Africa for a while, and I got to see as much of Africa as I could. But the virus has already invaded 52 countries. That leaves out 2, and probably as we're speaking now, it will hit those other 2. Of course it will. And this is where the great, and also in the Middle East and all those refugee camps and everything. And we will, the American people, I mean, forget the politicians, the American people. The American people won World War II. They're a great inventive people, and they will probably save us. Not so much our politicians, but the hard-working, the healthcare workers. It just breaks my heart to see some of them are getting infected in New York. And one wonderful woman, I just saw her. She had all these medical credentials, and she went out last night and killed herself. She just couldn't take it anymore. Yeah, it just, things like that just break my heart. But the fear is that even if there's a vaccine, and talk about spacing and living apart, I saw people living in huts of 18 people. It looked like the size of a large bathroom. And so the fear is it will come back, and particularly in the fall and winter, and will sweep through these communities that there are no masks, and I mean, what's a ventilator, you know? So this is my major concern for the world. I really believe we will also lose lives in the United States, but there will be trouble around the world. And what happened in 1918 was the original death toll was at 50 million, but now historians think it may have been 100 million. So based on, let's see, what was the population in 1918? It was 1.9 billion. Well, based on the population today, that would be 350 million before this thing played out. Again, not so much in the United States, but in the world. And I had great sympathy for the people of Africa. I saw many of them struggling, and I mean, my time there was wonderful, but then I had very marvelous time in Tangier, you know. I mean, all Marlene Dietrich, Tennessee Williams, everybody was showing up. But that's not Africa. Africa is really, it's in dire threat of the greatest pandemic that will ever hit it, we hope. So it's going to be a most unusual century. I do have a strange feeling. Why would anyone want to be president of the United States in the next term? Because I fear, and many historians fear, that whoever is president is going to be trashed by history, meaning they will preside over, you know, massive unemployment, deaths. I mean, you know, Herbert Hoover sure got a bum rap, but he didn't stop the oncoming depression, and now he's a disgrace. And so it may be this time around. I wouldn't want to be president now. If you and I had time, I would be your vice president if you wanted to take over the government. But
I don't want to be in any political situation ever, ever, ever. So no, you can find someone else. But
nor I. You know why? Because Governor Cuomo, really, New Yorkers are supposed to be tough people. Good Lord, we've had trouble. But New Yorkers are told we're going to have hell. And there will be a lot of problems. But people will have to go back to work. And they're calling it now acceptable loss, meaning there will they know there will be a loss of life. For example, Churchill and Eisenhower used to talk about that. They say Eisenhower stayed awake all night on June 3rd, 1944, because he knew he was sending young men to their death on the beaches of Normandy. But the ultimate goal was to keep fascism from taking over the world. And so I know it's a brutal concept, but sometimes great leaders have to make brutal decisions. Like Churchill didn't want Coventry to be bombed and the people killed there, but if he alerted the evacuation of Coventry, it would alerted the Nazis that their code had been broken, which was vital to the winning of the war. So, leaders have to make horrible, horrible decisions of who lives and who dies. So we're in a very strange time, Anita, and I want you to keep your wonderful voice going, and you've been so good for senior citizens of Florida. I'm an avid reader of your Boomer Times, and I like all the people you round up to give advice. And now it's going to be slightly different advice, but you've been a really heroine in Florida, and I think they should be putting the Medal of Honor on you instead of.
You're so sweet. You're such a great buddy of mine, and I admire you more than could ever imagine. And I will let you know I wear my mask. I'm not going places. I just, I really don't go to the grocery store. I just order in, and every day I just hope nothing happens because, you at least have someone living with you. I don't. And it's scarier. It's not the same.
Well, you have your dog.
I do have my Jack, and that's the other thing. I hope nothing happens to him or me because we're paired so much. But, there's an old thing that I remember that if you spend every day worrying, you're going to lose everything. So the thing you have to do is not worry. Just take everything as it comes. Be a brave heart, and that's what I do, just like you. I mean, I'm so glad to hear about the Judy Garland book. Are we going to be able to put it into our June issue? You think it'll be ready for June?
I'll let you know. I'll tell you. But you see, a writer works in. I stay up in my lonely tower, and I'm used to working alone because
right.
You can't have. Of course, I used to work in the newsroom of the Miami Herald. That's not working alone, but writing a book, you work alone. And for me, I haven't changed my lifestyle. But what happens? There's so many people, and they're protesting in New York. It's like there are bills to pay. There's a rent to pay.
Yes.
Mortgages to pay. I mean. It's really going to be some tough decisions. I mean, a lot of people can't lock themselves away forever. And they're going to have to get out. And then it brings up schools and education. But I'll tell you, there's a young man in Florida.
Darwin, I'm sorry. That's our cue to say goodbye. And I thank you so much for being with us. And I'm sorry about all the bad news you told me today, but I'm always glad to get it from you first. So take care of yourself, and
there is hope. There hope blooms eternal, doesn't it?
Yes, Darwin. And thank you very much for calling, and I'll talk to you privately, I'm sure.
Well, bless you.